The real estate agent's voice on the phone was apologetic but firm. "Miss Carter, I'm calling about 412 Maple Drive. The new owners are requesting access tomorrow morning for measurements. Will you be available to let them in?" I stood frozen in my downtown apartment, my coffee mug suspended halfway to my lips. It was 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and I'd been awake for exactly 23 minutes. I was still in my pajamas, my hair uncombed, my mind not yet fully engaged with the day. Outside my window, the city was alive with morning traffic, people rushing to work, to meetings, to lives that made sense. "I'm sorry, what? What new owners?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear papers shuffling, the click of a keyboard. When the woman spoke again, her voice had shifted from professional to uncomfortable. "The property sale closed yesterday. Your parents sold the house. Weren't you informed?" The words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what I was hearing. The mug slipped from my hand as if my fingers had suddenly forgotten how to hold things. It hit the kitchen floor with a sharp crack, shattering into a dozen pieces. Brown liquid spread across the white tiles like the truth spreading through my consciousness, staining everything it touched. My childhood home, 412 Maple Drive, the two-story Craftsman with the blue shutters and the wraparound porch. The house my grandmother Rose had left to me in her will 6 years ago, after she'd passed away peacefully in her sleep at age 89. The house where I had lived until I moved to the city 3 years ago for my job at Peterson and Associates. The house my parents had begged to stay in temporarily after their apartment flooded during that terrible storm in March. Temporarily. They'd said temporarily. "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice barely a whisper. My throat felt tight, constricted, as if invisible hands were squeezing it. "That house is mine. My grandmother left it to me. It's in my name. According to the documents filed with our office, ma'am, the sellers were Robert and Susan Carter. The transaction was handled by Morrison and Associates downtown. The sale price was $680,000, all cash, quick close. I suggest you contact them directly if there's been some kind of error." I stood there in my kitchen, coffee spreading across the floor, glass shards glittering in the morning sunlight streaming through the window, and felt my entire world tilt sideways. My own parents had sold my house, the house that wasn't theirs to sell, the house that held 36 years of my memories, my grandmother's love, my history. "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "That house is mine. My grandmother left it to me. According to the documents, ma'am, the sellers were Robert and Susan Carter. The transaction was handled by Morrison and Associates. I suggest you contact them directly." I called my mother immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. She answered on the first ring, her voice unnaturally cheerful, artificially bright in a way that made my skin crawl. "Vivian, darling, how wonderful to hear from you on a Tuesday morning. We were just about to call you actually. Your father and I have the most wonderful news." "Mom." My voice cut through her cheerfulness like a knife through butter. "What the hell is going on?" "A real estate agent just called me. He told me you sold my house." "My house, Mom?" "The house Grandma left to me." The silence that followed was so complete, so absolute, that for a moment I thought the call had dropped. I pulled the phone away from my ear to check the screen. Still connected. 3 seconds. 4, 5. Then, in a tone I'd never heard before, cold and calculated and utterly devoid of maternal warmth, she said, "Your house? Darling, let's be realistic here. We've lived there for 3 years. 3 years of maintaining it, paying the utilities, keeping everything running smoothly. Your father fixed the entire roof last summer. Do you have any idea what that cost? $12,000. We invested over $30,000 in renovations. The kitchen, the bathrooms, the new furnace. We had every right to. You had no right." The words exploded out of me, a scream I couldn't contain. My neighbor probably heard it through the walls. I didn't care. Grandma left that house to me. It's in my name. It was in her will. How is this even possible? My mother's voice was smooth now, confident, the voice of someone who'd rehearsed this conversation, who knew exactly what to say. "Is it though, Vivian? In your name? Because when you gave us power of attorney to handle that little tax issue while you were traveling in Europe 2 years ago, we made sure all the important papers were properly filed. Properly corrected, I should say. The house is ours now legally. The deed is in our names. We sold it for $680,000, and we've already moved to our beautiful new condo in Sarasota. The weather is gorgeous, by the way. You should visit sometime." The room spun. My vision blurred at the edges, darkening like I might faint. I stumbled to a chair and sat down hard. The power of attorney. Oh God, the power of attorney. 2 years ago in August I'd been in Paris on vacation, my first real vacation in 5 years. My father had called, frantic, saying the county had sent urgent notices about a property tax discrepancy, something about improper filing from when my grandmother's estate was settled. He said it was bureaucratic nonsense, but it needed to be handled immediately or I'd face penalties. I'd been at a cafe in Montmartre, drinking wine, laughing with friends I'd made at the hostel. The sun had been setting over the Seine. I'd been happy, truly happy for the first time since my grandmother had died. And my father had sounded so worried, so concerned for me, so helpful when he offered to take care of everything if I just signed some documents giving him temporary legal authority. Just temporary, he'd said. Just to handle this tax thing and get it resolved. I'll messenger the papers to your hostel. Sign them, send them back, and you can enjoy your vacation without worry. I trusted him. I'd signed the documents without reading them carefully, without getting them reviewed by a lawyer, without questioning anything. I trusted my own father. You forged my signature. You stole my inheritance. We didn't steal anything. My father's voice joined the call. He must have been listening on speakerphone. We did what was necessary. You abandoned that house, Vivian. You lived 2 hours away in your fancy apartment with your fancy job. We needed security for our retirement. Your grandmother would have wanted us to be taken care of. She wanted me to have that house. She put it in her will specifically for me because she knew you'd waste everything on gambling and luxury vacations. The words tumbled out, all the things I'd never said, all the resentment I'd swallowed for years to keep the peace. Don't you dare speak about your mother that way. My father's voice turned harsh. We raised you, fed you, clothed you for 18 years. This is payment for all we sacrificed. Payment? You want payment for being parents. The house is sold, Vivian. The money is in our account. If you make trouble, we'll make sure everyone knows what an ungrateful daughter you are. Your grandmother would be ashamed of you. They hung up. I stood there in my apartment, surrounded by the detritus of my morning routine, and felt my entire foundation crack. My parents, the people who had raised me, had systematically stolen the only thing my grandmother had been able to leave me. That house wasn't just property. It was my grandmother's love made concrete, her way of making sure I'd always have a place to call home no matter what happened. I called Morrison and Associates. The lawyer who handled the sale, a Mr. Peterson, was professionally apologetic but clear. The documents were all in order, Ms. Carter. Your parents presented a valid power of attorney and property deed. If you believe there was fraud, you'll need to pursue legal action. But I should warn you, these cases are expensive and difficult to prove. How much did you say the house sold for? $680,000. Quite a good price for that neighborhood. I did the math in my head. My grandmother's house, the 3-bedroom Craftsman with the wraparound porch and the oak tree in the backyard where I'd had my 10th birthday party, where I'd learned to ride a bike, where I'd cried over my first heartbreak, reduced to a number in someone's bank account. The following days passed in a fog of disbelief and rage. I called in sick to work, something I'd never done in 5 years at Peterson and Associates. My boss, Margaret, was understanding when I explained in vague terms that I was dealing with a family emergency. She didn't ask questions, didn't pry, just told me to take the time I needed. But I couldn't take time. I couldn't sit still. Every moment felt like a race against some invisible clock. What if my parents were destroying evidence? What if they were moving money offshore? What if they were covering their tracks in ways I couldn't even imagine? I spent hours on the phone with various attorneys, trying to find someone who understood the complexity of the case, who would take it seriously instead of dismissing it as just a family dispute. Most of them were sympathetic but ultimately unhelpful. These cases are very difficult, Ms. Carter, one lawyer told me, his voice dripping with practiced compassion that felt hollow. Family members commit fraud against each other all the time, and proving it requires extensive documentation. Even when you can prove it, judges are often reluctant to rule against parents in favor of their children. There's a cultural bias toward forgiveness and reconciliation. Even when they've stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars? Even then, I'm sorry, but that's the reality. I hung up feeling more defeated than ever. That night I did something I'd resisted doing for years. I opened the box in my closet labeled Grandma's Things, items I'd saved from her house before my parents moved in. Photo albums, some of her costume jewelry, a few books, her recipe box. I flipped through the recipe cards, each one written in her careful looping handwriting. Chocolate chip cookies, Vivian's favorite since age 6. Apple pie, make when she's sad. Chicken soup, for when she's sick, add extra love. Every recipe had a note about me, when to make it, why I liked it, how it made me feel. It was as if she'd been documenting not just how to cook but how to care for me, how to love me in the specific ways I needed to be loved. At the bottom of the box I found something I'd forgotten about, an envelope with my name on it, sealed. Inside was a birthday card from 5 years ago, my 31st birthday, the last one she'd been alive to celebrate. "My dearest Vivian," she'd written, 31 years ago today you came into this world and made it brighter. I've watched you grow from a tiny baby into an extraordinary woman, and every single day I am proud to be your grandmother. Life will bring challenges, sweetheart. People will disappoint you, even people who should love you unconditionally. But remember this, you are valuable simply because you exist. Not because of what you can do for others, not because of what you can provide, but because you are you. Never let anyone, and I mean anyone, make you feel like you have to earn love or buy affection. Real love is freely given, no strings attached. I will always love you in this life and whatever comes next. Your Grandma Rose. I read that card 3 times, tears streaming down my face. She'd known. Even 5 years ago she'd known what my parents were like, what they might do. She'd been trying to prepare me. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the house, about all my grandmother's belongings that had been inside. The antique furniture, her collection of first edition books, the jewelry she'd promised me, the photo albums spanning 80 years of family history. Had my parents kept any of it? Sold it? Thrown it away? At 2 a.m. I made a decision. I called in sick to work, got in my car and drove to Maple Drive. The house looked different in the pre-dawn darkness. The new owners hadn't moved in yet. The windows were dark, the lawn slightly overgrown. I sat in my car across the street, remembering. The rose bushes my grandmother had planted were still there, though they needed pruning. The porch swing where we'd sat every summer evening was gone. As the sun rose I noticed something odd. The garage side door was slightly ajar. My grandmother had always been paranoid about that door, insisting it needed to be locked because the main lock was broken. My parents had clearly been careless. I shouldn't have gone in. I knew it was trespassing, but something pulled me forward, some need to see the place one last time to say goodbye properly. The garage was empty except for some old paint cans and gardening tools. But I noticed something else. The wooden panel along the back wall was slightly displaced. My grandmother's secret storage space. She'd shown it to me when I was 12, made me promise never to tell my parents about it. "Just between us girls," she'd whispered. I moved the panel aside and reached into the darkness. My fingers touched cardboard. I pulled out a box, then another, then 3 more. 5 boxes total, each labeled in my grandmother's careful handwriting. "For Vivian. Do not open until needed." My hands shook as I carried them to my car. I drove to a 24-hour diner, ordered coffee I didn't drink and opened the first box in a back booth. Inside were documents, property records, bank statements, a letter from my grandmother dated 1 month before her death. "My dearest Vivian," it began. "If you're reading this, it means something has gone wrong with my will. I know my son and his wife well enough to know they might try to take what I've left you. Robert is my child and I love him, but he has never understood the value of anything beyond money. Susan is worse. She sees the world as something to be exploited. I've watched you grow from a beautiful child into an extraordinary woman. You have integrity, kindness, and strength. That's why I want you to have this house, these things. Not because you need them, but because you'll appreciate them. You'll understand what they represent. In this box and the others you'll find proof of everything. The original deed with your name, copies of my will filed with 3 different attorneys, photographs of the house and its contents for insurance purposes, and something else. The location of items. I've hidden for you things your parents would sell without a second thought. The ruby ring I wore at my wedding is taped under the bathroom sink's base cabinet. My mother's pearls are in a false bottom I had made in the hall closet cedar chest. The gold coins your grandfather collected are buried in a waterproof container under the 4th rose bush from the left, 18 inches deep. The first edition books are at your friend Sarah Mitchell's house. I gave them to her mother for safekeeping 2 months ago. But most importantly, Vivian, in this box you'll find documentation of something your parents don't know about. When your grandfather died in 1987, he had a life insurance policy worth $200,000. I never told Robert. I invested it and let it grow for 38 years. It's now worth $1.2 million, held in an irrevocable trust with you as the sole beneficiary. The paperwork is in the blue folder. I did this because I knew what would happen. Your parents will take the house if they can. They'll spend the money within 5 years on luxury and waste. But this trust, they can never touch it. It's yours completely when you turn 35 or when you need it most, whichever comes first. Don't be sad, my darling girl. Don't let their greed poison your heart. You are worth more than any house, any money. You are my legacy, not these things. But since they'll try to take everything anyway, I made sure you'd be protected. I love you forever. Be strong, be true, and when the time is right, stand up for yourself. Your grandma, Rose. I sat in that diner booth and cried. Not tears of sadness, but of rage and gratitude mixed together. My grandmother had known. She'd known exactly what would happen and she'd planned for it. The blue folder contained everything: trust documents, account numbers, contact information for the trust attorney, a woman named Rebecca Hartman in Portland. There were also detailed photographs of every room in the house, every piece of furniture, every item of value, all dated and notarized. At 9 a.m. I called Rebecca Hartman. She answered personally. Miss Carter, she said warmly, I've been expecting your call. Your grandmother told me you'd reach out when you needed help. I've been the trustee of Rose's estate for 16 years. How can I assist you? I told her everything. The stolen house, the forged documents, the betrayal. She listened without interrupting. I need you to do something for me, she said when I finished. Don't contact your parents. Don't let them know you found Rose's boxes. Let them think they've won. Meanwhile, send me all the documentation you have. I'll have my investigator verify the forgery and we'll build a case. But Vivian, what your grandmother left you in trust, that money can't be touched for legal fees. However, I've been authorized to advance you up to $50,000 for legitimate expenses related to protecting your inheritance. Consider it a loan against the trust, interest-free. Why would you do that? Because Rose was my aunt. She was my mother's sister. We're family, Vivian, though we've never met. And family protects family. Real family, not the kind that steals from you. The next 2 weeks were a blur of paperwork, meetings, and careful planning. Rebecca's investigator, a former FBI forensic document analyst named Marcus Chen, confirmed that my signature had been forged on multiple documents. The power of attorney I'd actually signed covered only tax filing, nothing about property transfer. The deed transfer documents were fraudulent, but the real breakthrough came when Marcus discovered something else. My parents had sold the house for $680,000, but according to county records, the comparable market value was $920,000. They'd taken a lowball offer because the buyer, a real estate investment company called Prestige Properties LLC, had promised a quick cash close with no inspection. The managing member of Prestige Properties LLC, my uncle, my father's brother, Jonathan Carter. They'd sold my house to family for below market value, likely with some kind of kickback arrangement. This is fraud on multiple levels, Rebecca explained during our meeting. Forgery, theft, conspiracy, possibly elder abuse since they manipulated Rose's wishes. The problem is proving it all and getting criminal charges filed. The civil case, however, that we can win. How long will it take? Months, possibly a year. But Vivian, I need you to understand something. Even if we win, even if we get the house back or force its sale at market value, the relationship with your parents will be over. Forever. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my childhood. The way my mother had always been critical, never satisfied with my achievements unless they reflected well on her. The way my father had used me as emotional support for his gambling losses, making me feel responsible for his moods. The way they'd both dismissed my career, my choices, my life unless it served their purposes. The way they'd spent years telling me I owed them, that I was selfish, that I should be grateful. And then I thought about my grandmother. The way she'd actually listen when I talked. The way she'd encouraged my dreams without trying to control them. The way she'd loved me not for what I could give her but for who I was. File everything, I said. I want justice. While Rebecca built the legal case, I had other plans. I rented a storage unit, and late one night with Sarah Mitchell and her brother as witnesses, I went back to the house. The new owners were away on vacation. Jonathan had mentioned it loudly at a family dinner I'd skipped but that my cousin had attended. We entered through the garage, documented everything with video, and I retrieved what my grandmother had hidden for me. The ruby ring was exactly where she'd said, still in its small velvet box, taped securely under the bathroom sink cabinet. The pearls were in the cedar chest's false bottom, along with several other pieces of jewelry I remembered her wearing. The gold coins were buried under the rose bush, in a sealed container that had protected them perfectly. But the most shocking discovery was in the attic. Behind an old dresser that was too heavy to move easily, I found one more thing my grandmother had hidden. A locked metal filing box. The key was taped to the bottom of the jewelry box with the pearls. Inside were more letters, these addressed to various family members but never sent. Letters to my grandfather written over the years of their marriage. Letters to my father, expressing her disappointment in his choices. And one letter, dated the day before she died, addressed to me. My darling Vivian, if you found this box, you've already found everything else, and you know now what your parents have done. I'm writing this from the hospital with the nurse's help, because I want you to know some truths I could never speak aloud. Your father was not always the man he is now. Once he had dreams. He wanted to be a teacher, to help children, to make a difference. But his own father, your grandfather Richard, crushed those dreams. Richard wanted Robert to be a businessman, to make money, to achieve status. When Robert defied him and went to teaching college, Richard cut him off financially. Your mother Susan swooped in during that vulnerable time. She saw Robert's potential inheritance, your grandfather's money and property. She convinced Robert to give up teaching and reconcile with his father. She made him into what Richard wanted, and in return she got the lifestyle she craved. But here's what neither of them knew. When Robert caved and gave up his dreams, Richard lost all respect for him. He changed his will and left most of his estate to charity. Robert got only $50,000, this house and his father's disappointment. That's why your parents are the way they are. That's why they grasp at money and status and things. They sacrificed everything for wealth that never came. Your father gave up his soul for his father's approval, and it wasn't enough. Your mother married a man she thought would be rich, and he wasn't. I'm telling you this not to excuse them, but to help you understand. Hurt people hurt people. Your parents are wounded, and they've spent 30 years nursing their wounds instead of healing them. You're different, Vivian. You chose your own path. You went after your dreams despite their disapproval. You became the person Robert could have been if he'd been braver. That's why I trust you with everything. That's why you get the house, the trust, the treasures. Not because you need them, but because you'll use them wisely. You'll build a life of meaning, not just accumulation. When they take the house, and they will, I know they will, don't let it destroy you. Remember that things are just things. The house is wood and brick. What matters is the love we shared there, and no one can steal memories. Fight for justice if you must, but don't let fighting consume you. Live well. Love deeply. Create beauty. That's the real inheritance I'm leaving you. And please, if you can, forgive them someday. Not for their sake, but for yours. Anger is acid. It destroys the container it's held in. I love you more than words can express. Grandma Rose. I sat on the dusty attic floor and read that letter 3 times. Then I carefully packed everything, locked the house, and left. 3 days later, I sent my parents a single text message. I know what you did. You'll be hearing from my attorney. My mother called 16 times in 1 hour. My father sent emails ranging from angry to pleading to threatening. I responded to none of them. Rebecca filed the lawsuit the following week. The complaint was 37 pages long and detailed every aspect of the fraud: forgery, theft by deception, breach of fiduciary duty, conspiracy, unjust enrichment. We sued my parents, my uncle, and Prestige Properties LLC. The response was immediate and vicious. My mother showed up at my apartment building, screaming in the lobby about ungrateful children until security escorted her out. My father hired his own lawyer and sent a letter threatening to countersue for defamation and harassment. My uncle called me personally, his voice cold with rage. You're destroying your own family over a house, he said. Over money. What kind of person does that? The kind who refuses to be stolen from, I replied calmly. The kind whose grandmother's dying wishes actually matter. What kind of person helps his brother commit fraud? Your parents needed that money. They have nothing saved for retirement. Your grandmother was selfish, leaving everything to you instead of her own son. She left him the house initially. He got inheritance. What she did with her own money afterward was her choice. You're going to make them homeless. They have a condo in Florida bought with stolen money. They're fine. The case dragged through the courts for 8 months. During that time, several things happened. First, the discovery phase of the lawsuit was brutal and revealing in ways I hadn't anticipated. Rebecca's team subpoenaed documents from banks, real estate companies, even my parents' email and phone records. What they found was damning. Text messages between my mother and Uncle Jonathan, starting 18 months before the sale. We need to move fast before Vivian decides to do something with the house. Can you lowball the appraisal? We need the price to look reasonable. She'll never know. She barely visits. Emails between my father and various attorneys, shopping for someone who would help them clean up the property transfer. Looking for someone who understands complicated family situations. Daughter gave us POA but now having second thoughts. Need to solidify ownership. Bank records showing the $100,000 cash deposit into my parents' account 2 weeks after the house sale. The kickback from Jonathan that they tried to hide by depositing it in $9,000 increments to avoid federal reporting requirements. And most damning of all, a handwritten note my mother had written to herself, found in her personal planner during a search of the Florida condo. Talk to Jonathan about the house. If we time it right, Vivian won't find out until after closing. Once it's done, what can she really do? Sue her own parents? She won't. Too guilty. Too soft. When Rebecca showed me that note, I felt something inside me go ice cold. She calculated it, I said quietly. She calculated my emotions. She was counting on me being too weak to fight back. She was wrong, Rebecca replied firmly, and we're going to prove just how wrong she was. The depositions were excruciating. I had to sit across the table from my father while he was questioned under oath. He wouldn't look at me. Not once during the entire 4-hour session did he meet my eyes. My mother's deposition was worse. She cried through most of it, playing the victim, talking about how hard they'd worked to maintain the house, how much money they'd spent, how they'd only done what they thought was right for the family. We never meant to hurt Vivian, she sobbed into a tissue. We thought she'd understand. We thought she'd be happy for us, starting our retirement in a nice place. We're her parents. Don't parents deserve something from their children? Rebecca was relentless. Mrs. Carter, did you ever ask Vivian's permission to sell the house? Well, no, but did you tell her you were planning to sell it? Not exactly, but did you disclose to Vivian that you'd use the power of attorney she signed for tax purposes to transfer the deed into your names? That's not how it. Yes or no, Mrs. Carter? A long pause. No. Did you and your husband conspire with Jonathan Carter to sell the house below market value in exchange for an under-the-table payment? That's not what happened. We have bank records, Mrs. Carter. We have text messages. We have a paper trail. So I'll ask again. Did you or did you not receive $100,000 in cash from Jonathan Carter after the sale? Another pause. Longer this time. Yes. And did you report that money as income on your taxes? We plan to. That's a no then. Watching my mother squirm under questioning should have made me happy. It should have felt like vindication. Instead, I just felt empty. This woman had given birth to me. She'd been there for my first steps, my first words, my first day of school. And now we were on opposite sides of a legal battle, and she was lying under oath to protect money she'd stolen from me. The family dinner that changed everything happened 3 weeks into the lawsuit. My Aunt Jennifer, my mother's sister, called and essentially demanded my presence at her house for Sunday dinner. This family is falling apart, she said, her voice sharp with disapproval. Your parents are devastated. They've done nothing but cry for weeks. Your cousins are taking sides. Your Uncle Jonathan is threatening to cut off his own brother. We need to sit down like adults and resolve this. I almost didn't go, but part of me wanted to face them all, to make them look me in the eye and explain how they justified what had been done to me. The dinner was an ambush, pure and simple. I arrived to find not just Aunt Jennifer and her husband, but my parents, Uncle Jonathan, 3 of my cousins, and even my grandfather's sister, Aunt Beatrice, who was 92 and had been dragged out of her nursing home for this intervention. They'd set it up like a tribunal. My parents sat at one end of the long table, looking wounded and fragile. Everyone else was arranged around the sides, all eyes on me as I stood in the doorway. Vivian, Aunt Jennifer began, her voice dripping with false sweetness, we're all here because we love you and we love your parents. This lawsuit is tearing our family apart. Surely we can find a way to resolve this without lawyers and courts and all this ugliness. I stood my ground. The lawsuit exists because my parents committed fraud. They forged documents and stole my inheritance. What exactly is there to resolve? My mother burst into tears. Right on cue, I thought bitterly. My father put his arm around her protectively. How can you be so cold? My cousin Marcus demanded. He was 28, unmarried, living in my uncle's basement. These are your parents. They raised you. They're practically living in poverty now because of your legal fees, and you're sitting here calling them criminals. They are criminals, I said calmly. Forgery and theft are crimes. The fact that they're my parents doesn't change that. Aunt Beatrice, who I'd always liked, spoke up in her quavering voice. Vivian dear, I knew your grandmother well. She was my friend for 60 years. Rose would be heartbroken to see this family fighting. That hit me harder than I expected. I took a deep breath before responding. Aunt Beatrice, with respect, Grandma Rose knew exactly what my parents were like. That's why she left specific instructions. She wanted me to have that house, to have security. She knew they'd try to take it and she tried to protect me. Honoring her wishes means fighting for what she wanted me to have. But at what cost? Uncle Jonathan interjected. He'd been quiet until now, probably because he knew he was just as guilty as my parents. You're destroying this family over money, over a house. Is that really what Rose would have wanted? I turned to face him directly. Uncle Jonathan, you bought that house for below market value, gave my parents a cash kickback and tried to hide it with structured deposits. You're as guilty of fraud as they are. So maybe don't lecture me about what my grandmother would have wanted. His face turned red. You little. Enough. Aunt Jennifer slapped her hand on the table. This is exactly what I'm talking about. We're a family. Families forgive each other. Families don't sue each other. Vivian, your parents made a mistake. They've admitted that. They're willing to apologize. Can't you just drop this lawsuit and let us all move on? I looked around the table at all these people. My family, supposedly. People who should have had my back, who should have been outraged on my behalf. Instead, they were pressuring me to accept theft, to forgive fraud, to pretend that stealing $680,000 from me was just a mistake. No, I said simply. I can't drop it. I won't drop it. What they did was wrong, and wrong has consequences. If that makes me the bad guy in this family, then I guess I'm the bad guy. But I'm the bad guy with integrity. My mother stood up then, her tears suddenly gone, her face twisted with rage I'd never seen before. You ungrateful, selfish bitch, she spat. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us. Your father is having panic attacks every night because of the stress you're causing. I can't sleep. We can't eat. Our lives are ruined because you can't let go of a stupid house. The room went silent. Even Aunt Jennifer looked shocked. I picked up my purse and walked toward the door. Before I left, I turned back one last time. That house wasn't stupid to Grandma Rose, I said quietly. It was her legacy to me. It was her way of making sure I'd be okay. You stole it because you wanted money you didn't earn. You forged documents. You lied. You manipulated. And now you're facing consequences, and you're trying to make me feel guilty for refusing to be a victim. But I'm done feeling guilty for your bad choices. I walked out and never went to another family dinner. Second, the criminal investigation I'd requested went nowhere. The district attorney's office said it was a family matter and declined to prosecute. Marcus Chin, our investigator, was disgusted but not surprised. Property crimes between family members are almost never prosecuted, he explained. The system assumes it's too complicated, too he said she said. Second, my extended family chose sides. Most sided with my parents, calling me greedy and cruel. My Aunt Jennifer, my mother's sister, sent me a long letter about honoring thy mother and father. My cousin Marcus stopped speaking to me entirely, but a few relatives understood. My cousin Sarah and her mother stood by me. My father's sister Laura called me privately and said, I've watched your parents manipulate people for 30 years. I'm glad someone finally stood up to them. Your grandmother would be proud. Third, the mediation hearing was brutal. My parents showed up with their lawyer looking older and smaller than I remembered. My mother cried through the entire proceeding. My father sat stone-faced, radiating anger. Their lawyer argued that I had abandoned the property, that my parents had improved it significantly, that they'd acted in good faith believing they had the right to sell. He produced receipts for the $30,000 in renovations and claimed they were entitled to reimbursement even if the sale was reversed. Rebecca destroyed them methodically. She presented the forged documents, the expert analysis, the evidence of the lowball sale to my uncle, proof of the kickback arrangement. My uncle had given my parents $100,000 under the table in addition to the sale price. She showed photographs of my grandmother's stolen jewelry that my mother was now wearing in Facebook photos. She played recorded phone calls where my father discussed hiding assets from me. The mediator, a retired judge named Harrison Wu, looked at my parents with barely concealed contempt. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, he said, I've been doing this for 25 years, and this is one of the most clear-cut cases of family theft I've ever seen. You forged your daughter's signature, stole her inheritance, and conspired with your brother to hide assets. The only question is how much you're going to pay to make this right. The settlement took 3 hours to negotiate. In the end, my parents agreed to 1. Return the full $680,000 sale price plus $100,000 from my uncle's kickback. 2. Pay an additional $240,000 to bring the total to the house's actual market value. 3. Return all of my grandmother's belongings they'd kept, including furniture, jewelry, and personal items. 4. Pay my legal fees, which had reached $67,000. 5. Sign an affidavit admitting to the forgery and fraud. Total, $1,187,000. They didn't have it. The condo had cost $450,000. They'd spent another $200,000 on furnishing it, on a car, on cruises, on the lifestyle they'd always wanted. They had to sell the condo, liquidate everything, and take out a loan for the difference. As we signed the settlement documents, my mother looked at me with tears streaming down her face. "I hope you're happy," she said. "You've destroyed us, your own parents." I looked at her calmly. "I hope you're happy with what you tried to do to me, your own daughter." My father stood up, his face red. "You'll regret this. You'll end up old and alone just like your grandmother with no one who loves you." Grandma Rose had me. I loved her. That's more than you can say. We left the mediation in separate elevators. The money was transferred within 30 days. Rebecca invested it carefully, mixing it with the trust funds my grandmother had left. At 36 years old, I was suddenly worth over $2.5 million. But the money wasn't what mattered most to me. What mattered was the box of photographs I'd found in the attic. Pictures of me and Grandma Rose through the years. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, summer afternoons in the garden. Her arms around me, both of us smiling. What mattered was the recipe book she'd handwritten, her annotations in the margins. Vivian's favorite: make this when she's sad, double the chocolate chips, she always sneaks them while I bake. What mattered was knowing I'd fought for her legacy, defended her wishes, honored her memory. 6 months after the settlement, I bought a new house. Not my grandmother's house, that had too many complicated memories now. A different house, in a better neighborhood with a garden where I could plant roses. I sent my parents one final message: "The settlement is complete. Do not contact me again." My mother tried anyway, sending birthday cards, Christmas cards, long letters about how much they missed me, how sorry they were, how we should reconcile for the family's sake. I returned them all unopened. I wasn't angry anymore. I'd worked through that with an excellent therapist Dr. Chen had recommended. I wasn't bitter or resentful. I'd simply accepted the truth. My parents had shown me who they were, and I believed them. They were people who would steal from their own child. People who valued money over integrity. People who, when caught, blamed the victim instead of taking responsibility. I didn't need people like that in my life, regardless of shared DNA. A year after the settlement, on what would have been my grandmother's 95th birthday, I held a small gathering at my new house. Sarah and her family came. Laura and her kids came. Rebecca came, becoming a friend beyond her role as my attorney. We planted a rose bush in the garden, the deep red variety that had been my grandmother's favorite. We shared stories about her, laughed at her quirks, celebrated her memory. To Rose, Rebecca raised her glass. A woman who knew that true family protects each other, not exploits each other. To Rose, we all echoed. That night, alone in my beautiful new home, I read my grandmother's letters again. The one about forgiveness stuck with me. Anger is acid. It destroys the container it's held in. I wasn't angry anymore. I'd poured out the acid. In its place was peace, clarity, the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd done the right thing. I didn't forgive my parents. Not yet, maybe not ever. Forgiveness requires repentance, and they'd never admitted they were wrong. But I released them. I let go of expecting them to change, to apologize, to suddenly become the parents I'd deserved. I accepted that they were broken people who'd broken me, and I'd healed myself anyway. 2 years later, I received a call from a hospital in Florida. My father had had a heart attack. He was stable but asking for me. I didn't go. I sent flowers and a card, wishing you a full recovery. My Aunt Jennifer called me furious. "He's your father. How can you be so cold? He's the man who stole my inheritance and called me greedy for wanting it back. I've wished him well. That's all I owe him." She hung up on me. My father recovered. 6 months later, my mother sent a Facebook message. "Your father and I are moving into a retirement community. We sold what we had left and took out a loan to afford it. We'll be spending the rest of our lives in debt because of what you did to us. I hope you sleep well at night." I blocked her. I slept perfectly well. Now, 3 years after that first phone call from the real estate agent, I have a good life. I've traveled to 12 countries using my grandmother's trust money. I've donated to causes she cared about: literacy programs, women's shelters, arts education. I've started my own small business helping other people protect their inheritances from predatory family members. I think about my grandmother often. Sometimes I wear her ruby ring or her pearls. Sometimes I bake from her recipe book. Sometimes I just sit in my garden among the roses and feel her presence. She was right about everything. The house was just wood and brick. What mattered was the love, the memories, the legacy of strength she gave me. My parents chose money over me. I chose integrity over them. I don't regret it for a second. Last week, I received a letter forwarded from my old address. It was from my mother, her handwriting shaky and old. "Vivian, I'm writing because your father is very ill. The doctors say he has months, not years. He wants to see you before he dies. Please, darling, whatever happened between us, he's still your father. Don't let him die with this pain between you. I love you. I'm sorry for everything. Please come home. I read it 3 times. Then I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I cried, not because I was sad but because I realized I felt nothing. No anger, no guilt, no obligation. Just a distant, wild regret that these people had never been capable of being what I needed. I didn't respond to the letter. 2 months later, I received the notification. My father had passed away. The funeral was the following Saturday. I didn't go. I sent the same flowers I'd sent to the hospital, the same card, wishing you peace. My inbox filled with messages from relatives calling me heartless, cruel, unforgiving. I deleted them all. I didn't need to justify myself to people who'd excused theft and forgery but couldn't excuse my absence from a funeral. The day of my father's funeral, I went to my grandmother's grave instead. I brought roses from my garden and sat beside her headstone for an hour. You were right, Grandma, I said aloud. About everything. You knew what they'd do and you protected me anyway. You gave me not just money but the strength to stand up for myself. Thank you. The wind rustled through the trees and for a moment, I swear I felt her hand on my shoulder. 6 months after my father's death, my mother sent one final message. I'm alone now. Your father is gone. I have no one. I made mistakes, Vivian, but I'm your mother. Doesn't that count for anything? I thought about it for a long time. About blood and biology, about obligation and duty, about what we owe the people who gave us life. And then I thought about what my grandmother taught me, that real family isn't about blood. It's about love, respect, protection, and honor. My mother had blood tied to me, but she'd never had the other things. I wrote back once finally. You made your choices. I made mine. You chose to steal from me, to betray my grandmother's trust, to value money over integrity. I chose to stand up for myself and honor the woman who truly loved me. You're not alone because of what I did. You're alone because of what you did. I wish you well, but I wish it from a distance. Goodbye, Mom. I blocked her on every platform and changed my number. Now, at 40 years old, I live in a beautiful home surrounded by friends who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. I have work I'm passionate about. I have peace. I have roses in my garden, my grandmother's jewelry in my safe, and her letters in my heart. I have no relationship with my mother and I've made my peace with that. Some people might call me cold, unforgiving, heartless. Those people don't know what it's like to have your own parents steal from you. They don't know the betrayal of being valued only for what you can provide. They don't know that sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do is walk away from toxic people even if they're family. My name is Vivian Carter. I'm 40 years old and I have finally learned that the family who loves you is the family you choose, not the family you're born into. My grandmother chose me. I chose her back. And that's enough. If this story resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who betrayed you? How did you find the strength to protect yourself? I'd love to hear your stories. Remember, you deserve to be treated with respect and dignity even by family, especially by family. Until next time, stay strong and protect what matters.